Espionage flicks come in many different flavors, from light and goofy to dark and murky, and when you're in the mood for one, you're not likely to be interested in the other. So, we're taking them one category at a time. These are our picks for the 10 best spy films of all time. We want to start out at the silliest end of things on this list, so first up, we're looking at spy comedies, parodies, spoofs, loving send-ups, and the like. And the first that come to mind are probably the Austin Powers movies that infected our late 90s vernacular with hilarious yet terrible catchphrases that lasted too long. But we also don't want to forget its earlier incarnation, Our Man Flint, or the Coen brothers' twisted, bumbling take on the genre in Burn After Reading, or my personal favorite, the delightful OSS 117, Cairo Nest of Spies. But I've been begrudgingly talked out of it in favor of an even sillier film that I must admit is no less worthy, the absolutely absurd Top Secret.
The guards have passed.
All right, how long till they cut the power?
3 more minutes, and we can cut the wire.
The feature film follow-up to the breakout success of Airplane, this ridiculous romp trades in the disaster film for the spy flick as the target of its spoofing. Set in an anachronistic combination of World War II, the Cold War, and the 1980s, Top Secret sees Nazi Germans in a divided Berlin take on the young Val Kilmer in his debut role. He plays Nick Rivers, the Beach Boys-inspired rock star of, yes that's right, skeet surf music fame, traveling to East Germany for a concert and obliviously getting caught up in a cloak and dagger plot. And if any of that sounds ridiculous, just wait until you watch the thing. Chock full of the same kind of zany visual gags that made Airplane great. Top Secret also sports a supporting cast well above its weight class and a score composed by Maurice Jarre of Lawrence of Arabia and Dr. Zhivago fame. It is exactly the kind of parody that is so clearly in love with its target source material that it seems to be paying homage just as much as it's making fun, even as it's constantly winking at the audience, which makes it an utter joy to watch. Dialing back from the utterly ridiculous, we next turn to the light spy capers. Sure, there's some danger, but it's mostly in good fun, filled with adventure, banter, and romance, and nobody in the audience ever spends too long worrying that it's not going to work out in the end. Charade is a pretty stellar example here that keeps you constantly delighted and bemused even amidst some light murder, as is Stanley Donen's follow-up Arabesque and the spectacular Our Man in Havana. Confessions of a Dangerous Mind and Buster Keaton's The General, which you probably know from its train chase, but is actually the only Civil War spy film we could think of, probably fit in here as well. But let's be real, this genre was practically invented by Alfred Hitchcock, and it is he who sits atop it. First, with the 39 Steps as a wonderful warm-up bested only by our pick, the inimitable North by Northwest.
Don't you think it's time we were introduced?
I'm Eve Kendall. I'm 26 and unmarried. Now you know everything.
Cary Grant plays Roger Thornhill, an ad man who is mistaken for a government agent and chased halfway across the country in a series of spectacular, iconic set pieces, from the farmlands of the Midwest to the face of Mount Rushmore. Charming, dashing, quipping all the way to the MacGuffin, North by Northwest makes intelligence work seem like a jolly good time. It remains the very best entry in a very specific subgenre, the mistaken identity spy, which sees an everyman plunged headfirst into the perilous world of espionage. Cary Grant and Ava Marie Saint together are delightful, charming, and somehow manage to have a better time running for their lives than most people do on tropical vacations, and the film ensures we're right along with them.
Hello there.
Hello.
If you take the spy film, remove the silencers, and then dial the adrenaline up, you end up with the action spy film. Spying in this kind of movie has a lot less to do with the uncovering of information than it does with shooting lots of bullets and beating up the baddies. But, you know, with the occasional sneaking in between all the explosions. And you still have somewhat of a seriousness spectrum here, from the grittier spy action like in the Matt Damon Bournes, Daniel Craig Bonds, and the brutally badass Atomic Blonde, to the bonkers fun spy action of movies like Jackie Chan's First Strike, The Kingsman Secret Service, and our pick, True Lies.
John!
James Cameron's 1994 action thriller rom-com was the first movie to ever spend more than $100 million on production. And with it, they spared no expense filling their action set pieces with action set pieces, like a gunpowder and testosterone turducken, until it wasn't so much action-packed as it was action crammed to bursting, and in the most wonderfully outrageous way possible. Arnold Schwarzenegger plays a secret agent so deeply undercover that his wife, Jamie Lee Curtis, at her absolute best, is convinced he's a boring everyman, which is just exactly what anyone thinks when they're looking at plain old Arnie. Jamie Lee has grown bored with her obviously dull husband, so to save their marriage, he plans a fake spy mission in which to pretend to entangle her that turns into a real spy mission in which she gets actually entangled, and hijinks, as they say, ensue and explode. And it's got all the spy action staples: helicopters, nuclear warheads, our hero hijacking a Harrier jet, riding a horse into an elevator, the classics. It's the entirety of the 90s excess distilled into one silly adventure that presents intelligence work at its most delightfully over the top and then some.
Fear is not an option.
There's another adjacent kind of espionage film that sees the spy as a sort of governmental heist doer, where, more than anything else, spying involves elaborate infiltration and extraction set pieces. Sneakers and Ronin are two underrated entries in this kind of film, one a little more silly with Bobby Redford as a hacker, and one with some sharper action and Bobby De Niro as a merc, but they definitely both scratch the spy heist itch. But this spot is basically designed around one franchise that's designed around this particular sort of spy action, the Mission Impossible film. Now, we dearly love 3 for its villain, and Ghost Protocol is elevated by one really, really cool sequence, while Mission Impossible Fallout has a lot of them. But if we're picking a favorite, we have a real soft spot for the original. The first Mission Impossible established all the most iconic set pieces of the MI formula that the subsequent installments would go on to amplify to increasingly death-defying heights. And there's no doubt that the films that followed did it all much, much bigger. But there's something very satisfying about Brian De Palma's subtler first take, although subtle in this case should be understood as a relative term. Here, even with the action finale, we find Ethan Hunt and company most focused on putting the secret into secret agent. Double crosses seem to come naturally to everyone, and the new set pieces hew closest to the traditional heist formula, where deception, sleight of hand, thorough planning, and careful execution matter most, where the details of stealing from a secret vault are given the same level of import as later installments would heap upon the scaling of the Burj Khalifa. We love the later Mission Impossibles, but there's something to be said for life and death hanging in the balance of a mere drop of sweat. At the end of the day, sure, it's still a popcorn flick, but one with rock-solid fundamentals, and, thanks to some masterful direction on De Palma's part, probably as fine a popcorn flick as ever was crafted. Some films believe that spying is about clever operational planning, while others suggest that it has more to do with intelligence agencies' sanctioned firepower. But rounding out the lighter half of our list, we're looking at those movies where spying is about one thing and one thing only: panache. According to these films, the most important qualities of the best spies are that they stay cool under pressure, play great cards, wear the smartest suits, and look the best smoking cigarettes. You know the ones we're talking about. Silly Suave in The Man from U.N.C.L.E., grungy Suave in the Ipcress Files, maybe even the Quiller Memorandum. But come on, you can't top James Bond when it comes to suavery. But which James Bond is best? Maybe Brosnan's Bond in GoldenEye, or Moore's Bond in The Spy Who Loved Me, Dalton's in The Living Daylights, Daniel Craig in either Casino Royale or Skyfall, could be Lazenby in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, but come on, we're talking panache here. Of course, it's gonna be Sean Connery, who burst onto the scene in Dr. No, probably reached peak Bondness in Goldfinger, but was never better than in our number 6 pick from Russia with Love.
You look surprised. I thought you were expecting me.
So you're Tatiana Romanova.
My friends call me Tanya.
Mine call me James Bond.
It was tough to choose it over Goldfinger, which was the first 007 film to have all the most iconic features of cinema's most iconic spy, but we think From Russia with Love, while maybe a little less iconic for it, is the better film on fundamentals. Its action set pieces hold up shockingly well even today, particularly the extended train sequence, and its story, one of a Spectre-laid trap designed to get revenge on Bond, is peak 007. Bond, growing into his unflappable confidence despite suspicions about the mission, refuses to let something as silly as the prospect of death get in between him and a beautiful woman. And no, the film doesn't quite escape the misogyny that underpinned much of the series, but in all but one moment, it fares better than most, looking back nearly 60 years on. It catches Bond, full of swagger but before teetering into the realm of camp, daring, exciting, and dangerous, in probably his best outing to date. Turning the page towards increasingly serious spy films, if our number 6 pick was about espionage as being cool, our number 5 pick is about espionage as seduction. We're talking the spy romance film. Of course, all the Bonds did this, including From Russia with Love. They also did some infiltration and some action and occasionally some actual espionage. But of the films that really build around the concept of seducing a target for political ends, we especially like Mata Hari and Ninotchka, with Greta Garbo first as the seducer and then the seduced, Verhoeven's Black Book, and, most of all, our next pick, Lust Caution. One of Ang Lee's lesser-known works, although hardly deserving of it, Lust Caution is as meticulously crafted a piece of cinema as there's ever been. Say nothing of spy cinema, as Lee proves yet again that he is a genius behind the camera. Set in Hong Kong and Shanghai during World War II, the mission is unbelievably straightforward and simple. Get Tony Leung's traitorous Mr. Yi alone and assassinate him. But the agents behind the mission are anything but typical. They're a young theater troupe who take it upon themselves to use their acting for a greater cause, which may sound silly at first, but in the hands of Lee is anything but. They prove to be far savvier and the mission far more difficult than anyone ever would have assumed. Yi is a devilishly difficult target, ultra sharp and ultra cautious and never caught off guard, even as seduction lures both him and the self-appointed seductress spy deeper into a complicated tangle of emotions, and yes, oh yes, lots and lots of lust. The action is astonishing, especially from the two leads. The production design is second to none, and there isn't an unbelievable moment or false note or a second of boredom in this nearly perfect 2.5-hour intimate epic. If you even kind of like this sort of story, it is very, very worth the watch. Another fun spy film niche is the quiet spy film that sees spycraft as something that's done unobtrusively, mostly from a distance, with the assistance of technology and without pomp, circumstance, or thanks. Within it, our favorites are The Man Who Never Was, quietly recounting a real-life World War II plot to fabricate an invasion by way of inventing a fake officer, A Most Wanted Man's sublime long-distance puppet mastery, The Conversation's paranoia-fueled corporate surveillance, and Zero Dark Thirty's masterful march through bureaucracy towards complicated payoff. But above even them, you find our number 4 pick, The Lives of Others. An unusual spy film, The Lives of Others sees a Stasi surveillance agent in Cold War East Germany bug and monitor a potentially dissident playwright and his actress girlfriend. He comes to know them, and as he does, so too does he begin to feel for them. A debut feature, it certainly doesn't feel like one, as it meticulously crafts its story with a visual confidence usually reserved for far more mature filmmakers. It balances intrigue and politics with the relationship developing quietly alongside them, unbeknownst to the parties involved, balancing and intertwining its emotional payoffs with traditional sequences of danger and suspense. And it has real impact. The film quietly watches the surveillance state chew up all it comes in contact with, finding the good and the absolute worst parts of humanity within it. From there, if you ratchet up the tension with a couple dozen more notches and make sure to frequently focus on how alone, how precariously concealed, and how mortally in danger your characters constantly are, trade in all the remaining levity for consistent risk of exposure and death, and you get your classic spy thriller. Espionage isn't quite so sexy anymore. As it turns out, spying is not the world's least anxiety-inducing profession. Here, you get your spies trying to prevent nuclear war, like in The Hunt for Red October, sneak hostages out of a country, like in Argo, bring down an enemy agent, like in the aptly named Spies, and generally just escape with their life, like in Marathon Man, Patriot Games, 3 Days of the Condor, Ministry of Fear, Enemy of the State. There's a lot of just trying to survive here. But in terms of tension and impact, our favorite spy film of this sort goes to Spies Out for Revenge in Munich.
Allô? Allô? Allô?
Stop! Apporte.
Vas-y à l'école, chérie.
Based on the true story of the Mossad operation to seek vengeance against those behind the 1972 Olympic massacre, Munich is better than anything Spielberg has directed since, much of which has been quite good, and by a long shot too. His virtuoso ability to craft an artful sequence is mirrored in the hero's ability to craft a murder, both to the same chilling effect from which neither hide. A relentlessly taut entry into the spycraft as assassination subgenre, Spielberg keeps the existential tension beneath it equally tight by seeing to it that each perilous step of their operation puts not just their lives at stake, but also their souls. And as the physical task of killing starts to become routine, he allows the audience's focus to shift to the moral degradation of its participants, elevating it beyond action revenge thriller to something truly complex and memorable. Closing in at number 2, once in a while, a filmmaker takes the idea of a spy film, flips it on its head, and does something utterly unique, where espionage serves as more of a backdrop than anything else, and you get the spy art film. Lars von Trier did it with Europa, entangling a meek American in a Nazi plot when he visits Germany just after World War II, and winds up on a gorgeously surreal black and white film noir train. Tarkovsky did it in Ivan's Childhood, following a young boy turned spy in World War II, but you know, it's Tarkovsky, so he spends a lot of it bopping around through time and exploring the boy's dreams. And both The Passenger and Ghost in the Shell kind of have one foot in this category here, although we're not quite comfortable calling either of them fully spy films. What is definitely a spy film and also an art film and also phenomenal in both respects is our number 2 pick, The Conformist.
L'azione dovrà essere pronta e decisa. Camerata! Il treno per Parigi parte tra un'ora.
E il cappello? Ho perduto il cappello. Dov'è?
The Conformist is Bernardo Bertolucci's examination, sometimes sympathetic, sometimes disgusted, often seemingly both, of a fascist. In this case, a spineless, unprincipled man who values nothing apart from fitting in, which, when you live in fascist Italy, becomes a dark thing indeed. A member of the secret police, out of desire for status seeking, he is tasked with assassinating his old teacher, a good man, in order to gain the approval he so desperately craves. Part study of a deeply flawed character, part metaphorical study of a nation's character, the film has only a little of the traditional spy film espionage delights, but in its place, it has both deep insight and, as you can surely see by now, unbelievable beauty. We've said it before, but in addition to a subterranean journey into the depths of betrayal, The Conformist truly is one of the most beautiful films of all time. Finally, finishing things off in our top slot, we're looking at the darkest, grittiest end of the spy spectrum, and probably our favorite brand of espionage film, the murky, unglamorous, workmanlike take on the genre that puts the intelligence in intelligence, where everything is painted in shades of gray and no one is ever certain of anything, and spycraft is about savvy and subtle cunning and the ability to discern true motives from false flags. Here you find the spectacular Army of Shadows trying to survive in the gritty world of the French Resistance, and 13 Rue Madeleine tail end, trying to knowingly string along a double agent in its midst, but mostly you find adaptations of the work of John le Carré, who himself was an actual member of MI6 until getting his actual cover blown by an actual double agent. Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy is probably the most well-known of his adaptations these days. It sees a retired spy come back to expose a mole at the top of the British Secret Service, but if you like that, you'll love The Deadly Affair and A Most Wanted Man, which we already mentioned but are happy to shout out twice. Thanks mostly to Philip Seymour Hoffman. It's very, very good. There are also some excellent BBC miniseries based on his work that are unfortunately beyond the purview of this list. Fortunately for us, the le Carré adaptation we love most isn't. It's our #1 pick, The Spy Who Came In From the Cold.
I'm a technician, Fiedler. Just a technician.
But not a communist technician.
Oh, for God's sake.
A Christian.
I don't believe in Father Christmas. I don't believe in God or Karl Marx. I don't believe in anything that rocks the world.
But how do you sleep? You have to have a philosophy.
I reserve the right to be ignorant. That's the Western way of life.
Based on le Carré's breakout novel of the same name, written before he left the Secret Service, The Spy Who Came In From the Cold expects a lot from you, rewards you for it, but outsmarts you all the same. It sees its spooks intelligent, observant, constantly updating their assessments of each other, and anxiously maneuvering through an uncertain world where no allegiance can be trusted. As far from James Bond and Ethan Hunt as you can possibly get, spying here isn't about sneaking or gadgets or guns, but about concealing, revealing, and manufacturing intelligence. It's a job performed by dubiously motivated people doing actual bad things on the off chance some good may come of it. We wish there were more spy films out there this good, but if there are, we haven't found them. It is brilliantly plotted, plays like a chess game of lies, and feels to us like the closest cinema has ever gotten to actual spy work, which is why we think it's one of the best espionage films of all time. So, what do you think? Disagree with any of our picks? Did we leave out any of your favorite spy films? Don't say The Departed or The Third Man. They just aren't spy films, no matter how many people say they are. Let us know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe to IGN Movies and TV for more Cinefix movie lists.